Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Football Practice Facility. I'm Ryan Sylvia, joined by Noah Taylor. We're with VolReport.com on the Rebels Network. And day one of Tennessee football's 2024 fall camp is in the books. Afterwards, we spoke with Josh Heupel and a trio of freshmen. First, practice thoughts. Anything jump off the page from the few minutes of practice we were able to put in?
I'll go with Arian Carter and being able to see him, go full speed with the guys. Obviously, it's going to be a few days before we see full contact and things like that for some people, but a guy that obviously kind of came on as a freshman because of injuries in that linebacker room, really impressed. Then had the injury himself that kind of sidelined him the rest of the year, and then was limited in spring practice, often off to the side. But today was out there in his orange jersey and kind of going full speed. I think that's a really promising sign for Tennessee to see, because it's a linebacker room that I think has a lot of potential. Obviously, you got the anchor and Keenan Peely, the leader, but some young guys in that room, him being one as well, that doesn't have a lot of experience. But I think we've seen what that potential can be. So if he's healthy and going full speed by August 31st, that's a good thing for Tennessee.
Yeah, on a similar note, we saw Brew McCoy out there. He wasn't in a red jersey or anything, a little limited it seemed, but he was out there at practice, which is a really cool thing to see after he had that injury last year. And then Heupel also talked about Christian Charles, a guy that missed all of last season, and he was able to get back going today too with no limitations. So just some guys like that. One thing I noticed, Cooper Mays. It feels weird seeing him out of fall practice, not on off to the side, just stretching and trying to nurse an injury. He's good to go too. So it seems like a pretty healthy team. Cam Sheldon's dealing with a little bit of injury, but that's really the only kind of big piece right now. I feel like Tennessee is waiting to get back, and that's just your running back too. And that's a big deal that Tennessee uses a big rotation, but it's not even a starter. So I feel like Tennessee health-wise feels like they're in a pretty good spot. Nico, I think that's what a lot of people want to hear about. He looked good. Any complaints from him?
No. Yeah, it kind of looked what we've expected, what we saw in the spring. Just a little bit bigger, obviously, with the weight that he put on the offseason, but definitely continues to look the part of Tennessee's starting quarterback.
Yeah, nothing too crazy that we saw him trying to make throws, but he made all of his throws that he was asked to do. So that's a positive. Saw him throw against some defenses, and he delivered the ball. And pretty much, I think all of them except for one that was probably DPI, and then a ball to the kind of the back of the end zone that looked like Dante Thornton probably came up with it a little out of bounds. Besides that, I think everything else was completed. So that's a good sign for Nika going forward. He really seems like he's on the same page as a lot of these guys. One thing I noted, Chaz Nimrod, a lot bigger, but also working on the in the slot. Something to note as well. Obviously, the guy that's had to play both inside and out for Tennessee since he's gotten to campus. But going into year 3, Heupel also talked about how, hey, that's a guy we talked about yesterday in meetings, saying like that's someone that we're going to give a tip of the cap to because he's done well. Speaking of Heupel, though, we talked to him yesterday, talked to him today, so maybe not too much, but what did you think about what he had to say?
Yeah, I think one thing that was interesting was we got a little more insight now that we're in fall camp about the communication with in-helmet communication with, obviously the quarterback, and then obviously Keenan Peely, who's going to be kind of the captain of the defense there, the quarterback of the defense, really. But I thought that was interesting. There was some questions about who's in that headset, who's he hearing. Keenan Peely's going to be hearing Tim Banks, defensive coordinator, obviously, but it seems like it'll be Josh Heupel and Joey Halsley both kind of talking to Nico. I thought that was interesting because that's been a topic of conversation since the NCAA allowed that. Back in the spring, they I think maybe were able to test that a little bit, but now, here we are exactly a month away from the season. So he gave us a little bit of insight on how that's going to work, and said it'll be worked out. Maybe some of the technical difficulties they're having will be worked out by week 1. But I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and it's funny too. He's like, the quarterbacks probably want us to shut up in their ears sometimes. Just, but it should be beneficial for, especially. I think this is perfect timing for Tennessee too, with a young quarterback taking the reins, and you're able to kind of before the play have some sort of word with him and maybe tell him what you're seeing and help him through the process, especially in these early weeks. I do think it's important to note though that Heupel says they're very prepared to operate without it. Like that's not something that they're relying on every single snap and every game. Like they're very conscious that sometimes this may not work, and sometimes we might have to fall back to some other things. So it's not that they're relying on it, it's that they're using it as a tool, which I think is a pretty important thing and probably the right way to handle this new rule change. Freshman though, Jeremiah's Hurd on the offensive line, Carson Gentle, edge rusher. He's playing defensive end, and then Jordan Ross stepping in as Leo. Those are the freshmen we talked to. What are your thoughts on any of those guys?
Well, Jordan Ross, another big thing when he signed or committed to Tennessee as a 5-star was, his size and being able to come in here. You saw it on display today. Obviously, a late arriving guy, didn't have the benefit of being an early enrollee like some of his teammates, some of the newcomers were, but a guy that just recently arrived. But man, when you're seeing him out there in pads today and on the field and competing in some of those drills with defensive line, he fits right in with some of the veterans, James Pierce included, and especially the guys at the Leo position, which I thought was interesting. Even going back to what Josh Heupel talked about, he was asked about that, just how good they've been at developing guys. And you get caught up so much in the James Pierce talk, and rightfully so, but even Josh Heupel name dropped Byron Young, another guy that came in here with obviously a pretty tremendous story himself, but developed really well and is now playing really well in the NFL. So I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective and something that, talking to Jordan Ross, he was completely aware of too, and his recruiting process and how Tennessee's done really well at developing that position, and a guy that is in a deep room, and obviously he's working a little bit from behind because I think he's got a lot of the natural raw ability, of course, but working a little bit from behind because he just arrived. But somebody that's definitely going to be fighting to get on the field sooner than later.
It's definitely not a working from behind, like physically.
Right,
like,
he's ahead of the schedule.
And he said he wanted to put on like 10 pounds, and he's already there, and he's kind of ready to rock and roll, just wants to put on a little bit more muscle, but like weight-wise, he feels like he's in a good spot. Jeremiah's Hurd, though, he came in, a lot of people thought maybe defensive line, because in high school he played defensive line, tight end, and punter, he told us. But he's on the offensive line now, and that's a new thing for him. That's something he's had to work through, and he talked about kind of that transition. And it's probably not an easy one when you don't have too much experience. He said there's some similarities between playing tight end and playing on an offensive line. But he name-dropped both tackles, John Campbell and Lance Hurd, and then center Cooper Mays as guys he's kind of relied on so far to kind of help with this transition. I think one thing that I think honestly all three guys said was the speed, whether you're on the defensive line or offensive line, adjusting to the tempo that this offense plays with. That was something that was kind of tough to grasp at times, and maybe a learning curve, well, especially as an offensive lineman that's new to the position. That's probably something that he had to deal with, but it seems like he's got a solid grasp on it, considering he's so new to it. And speaking of size with Jordan Ross, I mean, Jeremiah Hurd walked into the room and he's the biggest guy by about a foot, it seemed like. So he's got the size of an SEC lineman as well. And he could put together a nice career here once his time comes, but he's got some time to learn with all the veterans on the line right now that are going to kind of be holding down this spot. That'll do all from us here today, though, inside Tennessee football's practice facility. Head over to VolReport.com for all of the coverage from today as football season gets going. Recruiting season is never over either. We got some guys coming off the board soon. Fazan Brandon is a big name, one of the better quarterbacks in the 2026 class. He announces this weekend, and then just last night and the last weekend, Tennessee continues to hit on guys on the trail. So everything Tennessee Athletics is over at VolReport.com. Links to everything you need is in the description. Thank you for watching.